This episode of the My Latin Life podcast is brought to you by BitRefill. BitRefill is the best way to spend your crypto in Latin America. Purchase gift cards or mobile refills from more than 3,500 brands in 186 countries instantly, safely, and privately. Visit bitrefill.com for more information. Out later, but I try to get through it in one go.
All good.
Welcome back to the My Latin Life podcast. Since 2014, My Latin Life has been your trusted guide to traveling and living in Latin America. My guest today is Patrick Flood from LATAM Stocks. It's a popular Twitter account and Substack, so we welcome Patrick to the podcast.
Nice to finally meet you, Vance. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. We've definitely been engaging on Twitter for probably a year now.
Yeah, I mean, you were one of the first accounts I found when I decided to try and grow the Twitter account. And I found a couple good accounts like yours early, and then I'm surprised how undercovered the region is, especially in English. So, yeah, I really like your account. It's been great to follow you.
This is true. And when I saw your account, LATAM Stocks, I kind of immediately knew the value proposition, right? There's not too many people covering stocks in Latin America, the stock market, independently outside of maybe investment bank coverage. So it's kind of cool to get like a freelance perspective on opportunities there.
Yeah, it's definitely wildly underfollowed by retail. I mean, there's not that many companies that are listed in the U.S. There's maybe like 30 or 40 Brazilian companies with ADRs, American Depository Receipts. Mm-hmm. And then there's a good amount of Mexican companies. But after that, a few Chilean companies, a few Colombian companies. But there's just really not that much access. So I guess people kind of ignore it, the retail investor. But, it's a huge region. If you break out South America and combine the economies, it would be like the third biggest economy in the world or fourth biggest in the world after the U.S. and China. So, there's a ton of investment opportunities for people that want to look. And I'm surprised by how few people follow it, honestly.
Mm-hmm. And you call it LATAM stocks, but you have a specific focus on Brazil, right? But you kind of cover stocks for the whole region, but Brazil is your baby.
Yeah, so I've been living in Brazil for over 10 years now. So Brazil is the region I understand the best, and it's also the biggest economy. So there's a ton there for me to cover. So the content ends up being heavily Brazil focused. But I do my best to follow along with Argentina, Chile, Mexico, Colombia, the other major economies. And I travel a lot too. I was in Uruguay. I covered a Uruguayan company recently just to cover it because, it's an interesting economy and, it's worth following. But yeah, definitely Brazil focused.
10 years in Brazil, that's no small feat.
No, I joke when people ask me. I studied abroad and I never left. So I did a year of my undergrad degree in Sao Paulo and liked it. And the same things we were just talking about with the equity markets, I kind of noticed in general with business in Brazil that there's just not that many foreigners on the ground. And if you can learn Portuguese and, you have a network in the US and you understand both sides, there's a lot of business and job opportunities. So as soon as I finished my undergrad, I was back in Brazil like 3 or 4 weeks later.
Common story I've heard time and time again, right? You go down once, you see the light, find a way to stay.
Yeah, because I showed up with no Portuguese either. So like after 2 semesters, I was there like a full year because I showed up a little early and then I stayed after the classes had ended in the second semester. And I was right at the point where I was like, if I came back, like I could speak Portuguese, and I didn't want to just, stay in the US for 3 years and then lose it. So I decided, come back and see what happens. And yeah, found a job and I've been working with Brazilian investments ever since.
So what does that mean? Did you graduate or are you?
Yeah. I finished it. So I did my junior year in Sao Paulo. So, semester 5 and 6. And then I went back and did the last year. So did 3 semesters because the classes didn't match up exactly. The U.S. schools make it hard because you're not paying them. So they, don't accept this class and whatever. So I went back and finished 3 semesters in like 6 months and then back to Brazil right after I graduated. I mean, I booked a ticket, no flight, and went back and tried to find a job.
And you were dreaming about Brazil. every day of your last year of school.
Yeah, man, I definitely, my last year in college, I was just ready to get graduated and get the piece of paper and be back in Brazil for sure. I mean, there were opportunities, it didn't feel, coming out of college, it didn't feel like, I graduated in 2013. It just didn't feel like there were that many exciting opportunities in the US for another guy with a finance degree, right? But in Brazil, I was, was wide open, right? I studied abroad at one of the better business schools too. So I had a network, right? Brazilians are very friendly and they like the network. So, it was easy to make connections and it just felt like a better career path.
Hmm. And what state in the U.S. are you from, for the audience?
I grew up outside of Philadelphia. So both my parents are New Yorkers. I was born on Long Island, but I
Okay.
grew up outside of Philadelphia and then I went to school in South Carolina, which I joke was a bigger culture shock than Brazil. But yeah, I'm not joking about that either. Like the U.S., it's like 5 different countries, really. I mean, California and New York don't have that much in common, and the Southeast is very different. So yeah, I felt much more at home in Brazil than I ever did in South Carolina.
I'm willing to hear you out. How is it that the Southeast was a bigger culture shock than Brazil?
It's a different. I like. How do we do this on a podcast? But I don't know. It's the Southern culture. It's very closed, right? It's Protestant culture. It's like it's how do you describe it? I don't know. They have their cliques, and like I went to a big state school at the University of South Carolina, so there were all the local kids that had their thing, and then I got called a carpetbagger at college in South Carolina, right? It's and someone seriously said that to me in a bar. I was like, okay, I thought that was like a Civil War term I heard in a history text, so it wasn't.
I
You
gotta
know what
look
I
that
mean?
up. I don't even remember. I don't even know what
It
that
was a
is.
term that they would make fun of, like after the Civil War, they would call Northerners that went to the South
Right. Okay.
to
The white people.
yeah to like start a business and rebuild the destroyed infrastructure and stuff. They would call them carpetbaggers. They would come back with like a bag on their whatever. It's supposed to be
Yeah. Yeah.
derogatory, but like I just
Yeah. I'm
laughed at
kind
it.
of looking at the Wikipedia.
Yeah, it
Interesting.
just wasn't like it wasn't the culture never opened up to me. Like I made friends, like it was okay. I learned a lot, but it's ironic because I felt more at home. I always felt more welcome in Brazil, even though I showed up without speaking the language. And yeah, sometimes language in common doesn't necessarily mean culture in common.
No, this is good stuff because this is a lot of what people want to hear. It's interesting, the sense of belonging and friendliness. People ask about this stuff.
Yeah, and like the sense of opportunity too. I mean, like you look at Sao Paulo's GDP. If you just break out the state of Sao Paulo, it's like 1.3 trillion in GDP, which is like a top 18, 20 global GDP, just the state of Sao Paulo. And
Hmm.
like
Yeah, it's crazy.
compared that to like a small state in the US or, there's just more opportunity. So like I felt like I was a bigger fish in a smaller pond, so to speak. So yeah, bought the ticket and went. I wasn't
And
going to stay in
you,
the South. I mean, I knew that. I knew that before I went to Brazil. Like a lot of the opportunities too. And that's the thing too. Like you're 18, you pick a college. You don't really think that far in advance. Actually, I picked my school because of their study abroad program because I knew I wanted to go abroad. But most of the recruiting and stuff and the job offers I got were all regional. So like I didn't want to stay in South Carolina. So my options were stay in the Southeast and take one of these jobs that I didn't want, or go back and just have to network into a job where I was from anyway, or I could go to Brazil and network into a job. So I went to Brazil.
yeah, I mean, most of our audience is American, so I think a lot of people can relate to this story in one way or the other. Either, you know, people from the north studying somewhere else in the United States, or people from the South going up to the Northeast to study at, Yale or whatever it is, right? And it's like a culture shock, and you don't fit in. So I think a lot of people have had some variation of that experience. Maybe you're from Ontario, you go to British Columbia, it's different, right? So people kind of have this experience where when they go off to college, it's a little different. So I can see that for a rough around the edges Philadelphia guy.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And like, there's nothing written in stone that you have to live where you go to college, right? I mean, part of it. My dad always told me like, go away to school. Like, don't stay here and don't like live at home and go to college. Like, go away and get the experience. And I did. I mean, I've been to a bunch of countries, and I just look at the time I spent living in South Carolina as another part of the world that I lived in and learned about. But it's definitely not where I would want to set up my base, especially now that I can work remote and I have all these options, like I'd pick other countries before I picked that part of the world for sure. But there's not nothing against it. Like it's not a bad place to live. Like there's people that love it.
Yeah, no,
Like
for
there's a
sure.
lot there's a
Southeast
lot of
is,
good things I can say about it, but it's just not personally where I wanted to live.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, no, I think the Southeast is actually a cool region. It's just more kind of setting the stage here. And so you studied, I guess, in Sao Paulo State, and then is that where you've lived most of the 10 years, or like what regions of Brazil have you lived in?
So downtown Sao Paulo mostly. So
No
like
way, 10 years.
so yeah, we'll get there. So like we travel a lot, but yeah, like no. So the financial services industry in Brazil, it's by far the biggest in Latin America, but it's really like 3 square kilometers. So it's like the smallest big city in the world. There's Avenida Paulista, which everyone knows, which is like the main drag, but that's kind of like older money. So there's companies there like Banco Safra's there, but the newer buildings are in Villa Olympia, Brooklyn Nova, which is like just south of there.
Right.
So yeah, it's like 3 metro stops, like 5 metro stops. So the whole financial service industry, the most dense concentration of finance companies in Latin America is like that region. So that's where I've been. Uh, Travel a lot. Like during the pandemic and everything, we left like 3 weeks after this. As soon as the Airbnb was up, when the first lockdown got announced, we were on the beach in Florianopolis, and we were there for I don't know, probably almost a year. So spent a year in Florianopolis. Travel a good amount. So I've been to the Northeast a few times. Uh, Iguazu Falls.
Hmm.
But yeah, other than Sao Paulo, I've spent more time in Floripa than anywhere else.
Got it. So Sao Paulo, working for a local company, which is pretty interesting because a lot of people listening to this, they're taking more of a digital nomad path, but that wasn't as accessible 10 years ago or even 5 years ago. So I think back then, a lot more of the Americans abroad were working for local companies, and there's still a significant segment like that, but now it's a little more diverse, I guess. So what was it like getting a job at a Brazilian company?
So I've worked at all kinds of Brazilian companies now. So like the first one was a boutique asset manager, which was mostly foreigners, but we were selling product to Brazilians. So those are the guys that hired me right when I got down there, and that was fine. I made a little money. Then I went over and did more of like a traditional investment banking role, and I was working at a single family office that had an investment banking arm. So I was doing the same stuff they would be doing on Wall Street. I was just making less money doing it, same hours, but yeah, on the Brazilian salary version. But it was fine. I learned all the stuff those guys would learn. I liked it. I made a great network. Then after that, I went and did fintech startups in the crypto scene. So I started at the largest crypto exchange at the time in 2017, and I was like the 30th person to work there. So that was like a small fintech startup, all young people. Uh, yeah, so it was like more of a Silicon Valley type culture in Brazil. And then after that, I worked for the second largest, which is now the largest crypto exchange, but I joined them much later. So they had raised like 200 million from SoftBank right after I started. So that was more of like, 500, 600 employees, like a well established late stage startup company. So yeah, it diverges. So I don't know. I don't know if you want to dig into any one of those specifically because it's hard to generalize.
Hmm. Well, what's the vibe of working for a Brazilian company in terms of differences in the business culture and work culture?
So they definitely work to live, not live to work. Labor laws in Brazil are crazy bureaucratic. So everything's regulated if you hire someone in Brazil, like officially hire them. And I'll get into it. We can talk about opening a company and why I worked via a company instead of. I've never been hired as a formal Brazilian employee. I've only had my company hired. But to give you an idea, like if you pay a Brazilian employee 5,000 reais a month, you're going to pay another 5,000 in taxes between like pension benefits, insurance, and everything. Like guaranteed vacation times, they get guaranteed 30 days vacation after you've been there a year. You're guaranteed a bonus at the end of the year, which is an extra month's salary. When you take your vacation, they have to give you a third of the salary as like a vacation bonus. So like the first time I ever did a model, like to project out a company, I got a monthly paycheck. for like the company, like the pay stubs. And I was like, okay, cool. So they pay $1,000 a month in salaries times 12, right? You're projecting for the year. And the director comes over and goes, no, 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 no. In Brazil, you take the monthly salaries that they pay and you multiply it by 13.3. Okay, well, that doesn't make any sense, but it's Brazil. So it's really, it's a complex work culture. It's bureaucratic, I shouldn't say. It's not that complex, but it's very bureaucratic.
What else? Tell us more.
Yeah, so like I said, with the taxes that are high, like a lot of people, especially at the executive level in Brazil, will get hired as a company rather than be a formal employee. Because once you get up to the highest salary level, I think taxes for your salary are like 27.5%. But if the company hires you as a consultant and they just hire your LLC structure or whatever version of that you have set up in Brazil,
Mm-hmm.
they'll pay less taxes, none, no, not none, but they'll pay much less. And then you will pay a lower tax rate too, generally speaking. So you won't pay the 27.5 after write-offs and everything. You can get your tax rate down much lower. So yeah, that's what I've always done. I've had clients too, not as an employee, but like I've never been hired as a CLT, is what they call it, Carteira de Leis Trabalhistas, is the labor law in Brazil. So I've never actually been hired like that. So yeah, I've been a local company, in parentheses, working in Brazil, but I've worked for companies formally, like a regular employee.
Okay, makes sense. Contractor, lower taxes than an employee, less restrictive, probably better for both parties. Makes sense. Tell us more about just like the funny aspects of working for Brazilians and in Brazilian companies and just like things that make you bang your head against the wall or I don't know.
So the lunches are like, it's like obligatory lunches for sure. Like they all go out to eat. Like you get exactly 1 hour for lunch, like because of the labor laws, right? Like, they get exactly 1 hour. Like you don't come back before. But like, yeah, they always go out, and so part of these benefits too, the company has to give you like a it's called a VR, a Vale Refeição, which means like the company has to pay for your lunch while you're at the office. So they'll put like 500 reais on the card for the formal employees every month. So there's this whole lunch industry, like in these neighborhoods, like I told you about the dense financial service industry. This whole restaurant industry that just caters to these lunch businesses because it's free money. So they always go out to eat. So everyone goes out to eat together, and they get a pretty nice stipend usually. So I can get a pretty good lunch. Like a lot of good restaurants that take the VR card.
Okay, it's a card.
Yeah, it's a card. It's Sodexo is the biggest one I've seen. I'm sure there's other ones now that have them. Like there's startups, but Sodexo was the most famous company that did it. And they're a big multinational.
Yeah, Sodexo does a lot of lunch catering and stuff.
Yeah. So yeah, the Brazilian employees get their little Sodexo card filled up every month, and they also get one for the metro, Vale Transporte. So part of the crazy benefits that you have to pay people if you hire in Brazil.
Okay. What else about working for Brazilians? Because I don't know too many people that have like worked for Latino companies in business or in like a high powered industry like this, you know? Like some people go down as English teachers or whatever, but that's totally different. But this is like real business. Like you said, it's like basically the equivalent of Wall Street, but in Latin America. But I'm sure there's like a lot of very funny cultural differences.
I mean, the biggest one, I guess, Brazilians are hypersocial. If I was going to generalize the culture, so I mean, all the terrible memes about too many meetings, Brazilians put that on steroids. I mean, it's just constant meetings. I would joke that like Brazilians, nothing gets done. You have a weekly meeting to discuss the last meeting and then plan the next meeting. That's all it is. It's like, yeah, we had a meeting yesterday, and then tomorrow we have another meeting. And what are we doing in this meeting? Planning the next meeting. It's just too many meetings, and it's not that common to just see people like I guess in some of the tech companies, like the hardcore developers would be just coding, but like it tends to be like the Pareto distribution on steroids. It's like there's like a couple people that get stuff done, and then 90% of people are just there to like talk about stuff. And it's another weird thing about the labor laws too. Brazil is one of the most litigious countries in the world. So like I think it's number one. I haven't checked statistics in a long time, but the most wrongful termination lawsuits in the world. I think if I remember correctly, it's something like, I won't give the statistics. I don't remember exactly, but basically, if you fire someone in Brazil, they're going to sue you. guaranteed, like especially like a lower level employee. So like a lot of people just they know they can't get fired. If they get fired, they know they're going to get paid. They have all these benefits and stuff. So like it's not it's not exactly like definitely not like a hardworking meritocracy in the sense like a stereotypical American company would be like, or at least what you would think the stereotype is. It's more slow paced, social. Not that much gets done. Definitely not quickly. Like the social opinions of everyone matter a lot more than the results of the work.
Mm.
I would say, which is very very frustrating, especially for certain personality types. So like yeah, internal politics tend to be more important than objective results. I would say.
Tell me more about this specific topic. Like, do you try to get people to do work and then they don't do it, but they like, show a good face? Like, I think people want to hear just like funny anecdotes
Like
about Brazil work experiences.
Brazilians always tell you what you want to hear. So it's like, yeah, 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 definitely, I'll get that done. And then like 3 weeks later, it's not done. You're like, shit, what do I do? Like, if you'd given me a week or the next time we do this, remind me of this and I'll brainstorm these because I have them locked away. There's not off the top of my head, but I've got stories. I know, like, let me think.
It's all right. We can come back to it because I know the people are like, I thought we were talking about stocks here, and now we're just talking.
Yeah.
Now we're just talking about lunch.
Well,
But I think I think it's funny. I think it's very funny, and it's true. I mean, I think this definitely happens in the States too, where only a couple people do the work, and then everyone gets around to talk about the work.
I'll give you one more lunch one though, since you asked. Like in Sao Paulo, these restaurants they have specific days. There's a lot of like buffets. They call them pork kilos, which is like a weigh and pay. So you take the plate, as much food as you put on it, they weigh at the end, and you pay by the gram.
Mhm.
And like they have certain days for food. So like Wednesday's like Arab food day, and like there'll be steak one day will be fish day. So like it's like coordinated across the city for this VR, the employees that have the card.
This episode of the My Latin Life podcast is brought to you by Language Blend, the new best way to learn Spanish. Language Blend focuses on what you actually need to live and get by abroad with daily one-on-one lessons, a dedicated texting partner. It's like living in a Spanish-speaking country without ever leaving home. Go to languageblend.com for more information. Got it. Yeah, one thing I couldn't believe about those weigh and pay places is that no matter what you get, it costs the same amount of money. So, like, if you got mandioca, which is like worthless, or if you got salmon, you'd pay the same amount of money.
They're not paying for it. Right? The company's paying for it most of the
Yeah.
time.
Or
But
even
yeah,
like you even like outside of that context, like if you just go to a normal Brazilian por kilo place, um, like everything costs the same. It's just by weight. And I'm like, wait, so I could be getting macaroni, which is like free,
yeah,
or I could do like salmon and picanha,
it's the
and
same. It's the
both
same
people
thing.
pay the same price.
They make their money off of like 80% of the people, right? It's the same thing as like the churrascaria, right? As soon as you get there, they put down French fries and bread and stuff on the table. It's like eat all this before the steak comes, so you eat less steak. And like most
Hmm.
people do, and then there's a couple of crazy people like me that literally just only picanha until the restaurant goes out of business.
And feel free to interrupt whenever you think of just like good, hilarious anecdotes about Brazilian culture, work culture specifically. Um, I know it is hard to have them like ready to go, but if something comes to mind in this conversation, I'm happy to take a pause and let you just drop some good stories.
Okay, let me think. I'll think. Because I got to go through like the casting characters in my head, kind of the people I've worked with, and then maybe want to come to me.
Yeah. So you opened a local company in Brazil?
Yeah, just a basic like LLC structure. I've had it open for 10 years now. So yeah, it's not. It's way easier than it was now. So there's startups that help you do it. I had to get a lawyer and everything back in the day, but now I think you can get it open in a few days.
Cool. And what was the purpose of opening this company?
To work because I knew I wasn't going to go through the labor law stuff. It was just like forget it as a foreigner. Like even you're such an anomaly down there working with local companies as a foreigner that like most of the people in HR like they'll ask you for like your Brazilian ID document. Like I don't have that. and then it'll be like a 3-day crisis where they're emailing each other back and forth trying to figure out what to do. Like, I have this document instead, and they're like, wait, we need to verify. So it's just much easier. They've all dealt with Brazilian companies before. Like, they know how to do the paperwork and the bureaucracy for a local entity, and it's much simpler than trying to convince them to do the bureaucracy for a foreigner because they've never done that before. 99% of Brazilian HR professionals have never dealt with a foreigner, whereas they've dealt with local Brazilian entities all the time. So it's just simpler, and yeah, it also guaranteed me I get to work on day one, right? Like, the visa stuff's long and annoying and frustrating, and it was just more straightforward.
How were you able to open that as a foreigner?
Foreigners can open companies in Brazil. You get
Oh yeah.
you need a CPF, depending on which structure, and then you need to. I think as a foreigner, you need to have two people on it. So like the lawyer that opened it for me, he was like my partner in the business until it was opened, and then you just need to bring a second person in to replace him, but the second person can be foreign too. So it can be it could be your dad or your sister. It doesn't have to be a local Brazilian.
Hmm. And I assume you have a CPF at this point.
Yeah, you can get the CPF online. It costs like $2.
Oh really?
Yeah, CPF's not hard. It's the RNE is the like it's the Brazilian green card. That's the bureaucratic stuff where you got to go get notarized documents and birth certificates and everything. But the CPF is pretty straightforward.
Because a lot of visitors to Brazil have issues where if you want to buy concert tickets or a bus ticket or lots of things, you need a CPF or the system, the online form expects you to have a CPF, but a normal traveler would not have that. But since you're speaking to a more sophisticated
Oh, dude,
audience of LATAM enthusiasts, I guess you
I
have
mean,
maybe some tips.
so like I would say if you're not going to do anything, I don't know. Who's the levels guy, the guy that does some of the remote work AI stuff? I follow him on
Hmm.
Twitter.
Yeah, Peter Levels. Yeah.
He posted the other day that like his iFood in Brazil wouldn't take his credit card payment, and I saw it and I go, dude, finally someone gets it. So iFood is 80% of the food delivery market in Brazil, right? Like, it's huge. They have like 300,000 delivery people. They have had a bug in their system for like 5 years now, where if you put in a foreign credit card, it asks you for the CPF. You put in my CPF, but obviously the foreign credit card number and the CPF number have nothing to do with each other. So they go CPF rejected, not associated with this credit card. And it's been like that for 5 years. So like a lot of that stuff where you need the CPF on the concert ticket and stuff, it's like it's the Brazilian team that programmed it that never thought in a million years a foreigner would be buying these tickets. So it's not necessarily it's not a law that you need a CPF to buy concert tickets in Brazil. It's the company that programmed that front end on the app that you're using that's asking for the CPF, and it's just not a good app.
Okay. And if I come to you, Patrick, and I say, look, I want to go to Brazil, I want to kind of smooth my path. Should I get a CPF or like what are some of the other things that I can do to just make it a little bit easier dealing with Brazil as a whole?
I don't think you don't need it. I mean, I don't know. I don't think you need it. I don't think you need the CPF necessarily. What can you do? I use my international card regularly. Like, you won't be able to open a bank account in Brazil as a non-resident. So
Mhm.
you're using an international card. So whatever you would do traveling anywhere to make sure you're not paying $20 ATM fees or international transaction fees, obviously. But no, Brazil's like it's like cards work everywhere. They're ubiquitous. So like your card will work as long as it works internationally, basically anywhere in Brazil. So I don't think there's anything you really need to do special to Brazil that's unique.
Okay. Because we do, I have recommended a number of people a service that helps them get a CPF to make things a little bit easier. Do you see value in that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I guess there's a difference too. If you're going for 2 months or a week, like if you're going for a week, like, you definitely don't need it. But if you're going for a few months, and yeah, you'll probably get asked for it. But I mean, I hardly use mine, to be honest. Like,
Oh.
you get like tax rebates and stuff. Like, they'll ask you for it everywhere, and like you'll use it to register at stuff. So like sometimes like at the buildings to get into turnstiles, like the office buildings, they'll just ask, "What's your CPF?" And like I'll register CPF, but some of them will ask for the RG, which is like the ID document, which I don't have. So then I just show them my other one, and then they register the number with a different number. So like most of the times, if you get asked for it, as long as the app isn't like bugged, and you can use your passport, generally speaking. But again, if you feel like you might want it, it's like $5 or $7, I think. I don't think it's an expensive. I don't remember. I haven't gotten it in 12 years, but it's not too complicated, I don't think.
Okay, good to know. Good little counterpoint on CPFs, and maybe you don't need it because I think a lot of the conversation online is like, "Wow, you can't do anything without this thing."
No, I mean, no. You can do 95, 98% of stuff. Like, I don't know, what would you not be able to do? I guess I would have to, what specifically couldn't you do? Because a lot of the stuff, like, there's apps like iFood. Like, I can't freaking order iFood with my international card, which is infuriating because it's like, they've raised $500 million in capital, right? So, like, and that's not a Brazilian rule or anything. That's just a Brazilian company that's not, you know, not programming their app right, you know? And like that, actually, the CPF doesn't even help me, right? I have the CPF and it still doesn't work.
Yeah, I remember I couldn't get tickets to like that most famous museum, the like red boxy one,
Masby?
Masby,
Yeah.
Masby. I couldn't get tickets without a CPF. I was like, "What the hell?"
Really?
Yeah.
Might be free with the CPF. I don't know. Because that one, yeah. Well, Travel Hack, there's a pretty good buffet on underground in Masby if you go all the way down. Like where I studied abroad was right there, like 100 meters away, 200 meters away. There's a pretty good buffet underneath Masby. At least there was years ago.
Let's talk about cost of living or prices in Brazil. You definitely have a good handle on this at this point. This is something that gets debated a lot. Is Brazil expensive? Is Brazil cheap? And you go, look, like people aren't making much money in Brazil, but then you go and rents can be pretty cheap on Airbnb, but a lot of things are like weirdly expensive. Obviously, electronics. I mean, how would you kind of give us like a full breakdown on cost of living in Brazil?
Okay, so like I said, I live in downtown financial district for most of the time I'm there, which is the most expensive region, with the exception of like Leblon and Rio de Janeiro, which is about the same. So, like for a good Airbnb 2 bedroom, like you shouldn't have to go over $2,000 a month. And if you value hunt, and like I've got 5 or 7 of them I've rented that I like you can get it for 1,500. So not too bad for rent. Definitely less than the U.S. I go to a street fair and get my groceries every week. So my weekly grocery bill for 2 people is, let's see, 500 reais on the steak, maybe another $125, $150. And that's with, a kilo of picanha, a kilo of, contrafilet. So like prime steaks, like fresh fish. So good stuff. And then what else? Insurance, I do international, which most people listening to this would too. So I'll exclude insurance because that's unique. What else? And then Uber's dirt cheap. Uber, like, I don't know. I don't use it that much because I walk to most places I'm going. But
Yeah,
if
we're
you
cheap.
if you spend $50 on Uber in Sao Paulo a month, that's impressive. I mean, yeah, $100 a month if you budget for it, that's a lot. I mean, it's getting you around to where you're going. And the metro works pretty well, at least in the dense area. Like it'll get you where you're going, and the metro's $1.80. So yeah, I guess those are my 2 biggest costs by far. And then a gym. So I go. So me and my fiance, we have different gyms. We spend like 600 reais each a month, but those are for specialized gyms. So she trains at like one of the best gyms in the city with like a pool, and it comes with trainers and everything. And then I train at a jiu-jitsu school that's unlimited classes, but it's 600 reais a month, so like $100, $125 a month each at the gym. So yeah, those are my biggest expenses. So I guess call
100
it,
bucks to the gym?
yeah, but it's like
Classes.
it's world class. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's a great value. It's not expensive. If you go to Smart Fit, it's like $20.
Smurfit's classic. Maybe we could talk about gym culture in Brazil.
Yeah. um. So they're super healthy, man. It's a healthier culture by far, in my opinion. They eat cleaner. The gyms are packed. They take care of themselves. My fiance is really into like bodybuilding, and like she likes like the Mr. Olympia stuff, and like she follows that like crazy. There's so many Brazilian influencers in Portuguese, like it's blowing up. It's like the biggest bodybuilding market outside of the U.S. and the world right now. I think like there's a guy Ramon, Ramon, who's like number 2 after Chris Bumstead, who's 4 or 5 million followers on Instagram, like really really famous. So gym culture is huge there, man. The UFC is huge. Like they have obviously the Gracies, and jiu-jitsu culture is huge. Soccer, football, obviously for the non-Americans, is huge. So they sport gym. It's a great country for all that.
Yeah, this is good. I heard Brazil has like the most gyms per capita in the world.
It might. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me, especially in like the densely populated cities like Sao Paulo and Rio. I could look that up probably. SmartFit is publicly traded. I follow them
Is it?
somewhat closely. Yeah, they're huge. They're like the fourth biggest. They are the fourth biggest gym network in the world. I know that off the top of my head. So Planet Fitness is bigger. Gold's might be bigger, but SmartFit's like the fourth biggest in the world.
And very international.
Yeah, they're all over Latin America, right? So last time I was in Buenos Aires, I went to a SmartFit. They're pretty big in Chile. I don't know if they're in Europe or anything, but regionally, like within South
Yeah,
America, they're huge.
Mexico,
Yep.
Panama, Central America, Colombia. I was actually thinking like if you wanted to do, um, here's a tip for people because I've really been thinking a lot about doing the Pan American Highway and like driving from the
Okay.
States all the way to Argentina or in reverse. If you got a Smart Fit gym pass, you get the I think it's called the Black Gym Pass. I think it's like $45 a month, and it gives you access to the international network of gyms for $45 a month.
Yep. All
And
of
if
them,
you
right?
were and if you drove the Americas, you could just rock up in El Salvador, use the SmartFit there. You have access to a shower, all that stuff. Every country you go to, you have a place to shower, you have a gym. So if anyone was ever thinking of doing the Pan American Highway, get a SmartFit pass.
Yeah, I was actually. It's funny you say that. The last time I noticed people doing that, but I noticed it at Planet Fitness. They were doing the exact same thing. They were using the showers and stuff, and they were doing a Fitness in the U.S. But yeah, SmartFit's it's huge and it's fine. Like it's got everything you need. I don't have the equipment. It's Planet Fitness. If you've been to a
Where's
Planet
it
Fitness,
headquartered?
Sao Paulo probably.
Is it Brazilian originally?
Yeah,
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 might be a good stock.
yeah. They had I don't know. They had somebody went viral a couple months ago about their accounting, and I haven't dug into it, but they're there. Like it's a decent company. And then there's another one called Bluefit that's yeah, original, right? It's popular. It's a little better than SmartFit, I think. Most people will tell you it's a little higher quality, but they just got a huge investment from Mubdala Capital, which is like the sovereign wealth fund of the United Arab Emirates, who's been investing heavily in Brazil. So that's another one. If you're in Brazil, you can look at Bluefit.
Yeah, SmartFit is based in Sao Paulo.
Yeah, they're
So
huge.
whoever the family is behind that, is definitely doing well.
I think they're relatively recent. Yeah, they were
Giving you
founded.
ideas.
They were founded in 2009. They really blew up. Like they weren't a thing when I first got to Brazil at all. So they took the Planet Fitness model and copied and pasted it perfectly.
I guess we can get into a conversation about stocks and I guess more business side of things in Latin America. Because I think what happens for a lot of expats and digital nomads is we come down for the lower cost of living and the better weather and the friendliness and the food. And then we look around and we say, you know what? Like a lot of these businesses aren't even run that well. Or we just see the opportunity and you kind of get your head spinning. You know what I mean? And so I think we're going to see a lot of that in the near future where it's really been the first couple of years of a huge influx of gringos into Latin America in a more significant way than in the past. And I think now, people are kind of getting settled and more people that I'm talking to on Twitter are looking to set up businesses, whether it be something as simple as an Airbnb or something more complicated as a brick and mortar business or e-com or something. So this is a lot of your focus area, right?
Yeah, for sure. I agree with you. You're going to see more international people, setting up business in Latin America for sure. And Brazil specifically has that history, right? Like Brazil's a country of immigrants in the same sense the U.S. So, you know, cultures have been doing that for generations, right? It's the largest expat community, Japanese in the world, Lebanese, got more Italian immigrants than the U.S. The second largest Oktoberfest in the world outside of Munich is in the south of Brazil. So like it's not new for immigrants to be coming to Brazil and opening businesses. But I'd say this, like a lot of people come and they're kind of like mystified by the economies like in Latin America, and they're like, what's going on here? And it's like it can
Yes.
be somewhat complicated, but it's also, I think that like the public filings of publicly traded companies are one of the best resources to learn about an economy in a country that there is. Like it's verified data, or, reasonably verified data. And like, yeah, like if you want to know about the oil and gas industry in Brazil, Petrobras publishes information every 3 months, right? If you want to know about the gym culture, SmartFit has a 100-page PDF you can read. So like you can orient yourself in that sense. If you want to open an Airbnb in Brazil or Mexico, find a housing stock and read through their filings, right? Like read 20 pages, and that's probably the best research you're going to do. You're going to look at their tax line and go, oh wow, why are they paying this much in taxes? Or wow, their taxes are really low. How'd they do that? Right. So like most of the information you want, you can probably get from publicly traded companies, or at least
Mhm.
enough to help yourself out for sure, improve your chances.
Hey guys, quick interruption to tell you about BitRefill. BitRefill is the best way to convert your crypto into gift card balances. These are gift cards that you can spend at hotels.com, Airbnb, Nike, and many more. You may remember Joel Valenzuela, previous podcast guest. He's been living on crypto exclusively since 2015, and he's a big consumer of BitRefill. And so I asked Joel, I said, what do you like most about BitRefill? He said that he likes the instant delivery, the precise amount so that you don't have to juggle a lot of gift cards, and he loves the global selection. Nobody else has this much selection of gift cards, over 10,000 gift card options across hundreds of countries. Go to bitrefill.com to sign up, and you can also use the code MyLatinLife for 10% back off your first purchase. Go to bitrefill.com for more information. Mm-hmm. Why do you think that it's so mystifying, the business culture in Latin America?
It's a language barrier for sure. I guess I think most people don't speak it, or wouldn't think to read a 100-page document in another language. Uh, yeah, another one. I mean, there's like a thing in investing called a home country bias, where most people just don't invest outside of the country they live in. So I
Mm.
think there's that too, where most people just don't even, South America, some faraway land where I go to Patagonia to look at mountains and glaciers, and it's definitely not where I invest money, right? Like it's not even something most people think about when they travel.
Mm. Yeah, the home country bias is a big thing, and I think that's part of the work we're doing here, right? Is we're helping people diversify internationally.
Yeah, and like I think there's a strong case for it, right? People show data that it's not, but I think that's just a U.S. biased version of the world or worldview, right? Like I think obviously I see successful entrepreneurs building businesses in South America all the time. I see new companies launching IPOs. Like there's clearly people building wealth by starting businesses, investing in South America. Like it's obvious. But yeah, it's a big leap for a lot of people. I don't know though. Like part of it, I guess, personality wise, like I always wanted to travel. I went to college based on the study abroad program, so it was like it wasn't that big of a leap for me. But I guess I understand why it is for some people that are a little less adventurous, or not as inclined to travel, less interested.
Hmm. And the Brazil market specifically is quite overlooked, right? Because again, you have the language barrier, and it really shouldn't be because, like you said, it is basically the biggest economy in Latin America. It's bigger than Mexico. The financial market's bigger than Mexico. Um, how do you think about that? Do you see that where maybe everyone's focused on Mexico, or I don't know, like Panama or something,
Yeah,
when really they should be more focused on Brazil?
the smaller ones, yeah, it's a lot of work for a little bit of return maybe, but Mexico and Brazil are definitely the two most important ones to focus on. If you look at how many companies they have listed, the size of the economy, like I think those two combined account for like 75% of all the venture capital invested in South America, right? I think it's like 50 Brazil, 20 Mexico, something like that. So those are definitely the two important ones to focus on. And then after that, it's wildly undercovered. I mean, Argentina's a big economy, but they're a mess. Chile's actually, they have a pretty well established stock market. So Chile's worth looking at for the adventurous stock investor, or if you're interested in going there, they've done things to try to incentivize startup founders to go in the past. There was a thing called Startup Chile years ago. I'm not sure if it's still there, but yeah, other than that, Colombia is interesting because of its size, and I like Colombia a lot. Like I would invest in Colombia if I found the opportunity. Peru is a huge mining company or country, but it's definitely like cost benefit or time benefit. I would focus on Brazil and Mexico personally.
Hmm. And how do you suggest that people get involved? Like, should they just buy ADRs and stuff through the US, or should they really look at somehow opening a local brokerage account?
So I'm not sure what the local brokerage looks like in Mexico. In Brazil, it's really complicated for foreigners. Unless you're like a professional investor, you're working at an institutional fund or something. Like foreigners aren't even allowed to have bank accounts in Brazil, like non-resident foreigners. So it's people ask me this all the time on Twitter. I get private messages, and the banks give these absurd quotes, like shocking, like $5,000 a year for us to open your brokerage account to buy these local Brazilian stocks. So unless you're dealing with like $1 million, $2 million portfolio, and even then, that's a significant cost. It's just not worth the expense. So I would focus on the ADRs, especially if you're just starting out. Like that's enough. If you read through and learn about 10 ADRs that are listed in the U.S. from Brazil and 10 from Mexico, like you're going to know a lot more about the economy in South America than you did before, for sure.
Hmm. And I noticed I've looked at opening local brokerage accounts in different places, and they weren't really even incentivizing me to buy stocks or bonds directly. They wanted to put me in these mutual funds with like guaranteed returns and stuff, but with big management fees.
Big
And
management
I,
fees and big penalties if you try and withdraw early.
yeah.
Yeah. It's a racket. I don't know. That's like I don't like those products. I mean, I don't know who does like those products. Only financially ignorant people buy them, I imagine. But like, yeah, I don't know, man. Like the incentive for people that work in banks and stuff is commissions, right? Like, and that's no different than Wall Street. So they don't really make that much money off of a foreigner that wants to open a $15,000 brokerage account and trade twice a month, right? Like they make basically nothing, and I'm sure they have a lot of compliance costs associated with it, so they don't really care. I would imagine if most retail people did, like the law doesn't allow for it. It would be a very smart thing for a country like Mexico or Brazil to make it extremely simple for retail investors to open stock brokerage accounts, but they haven't done it yet.
Hmm. It would be cool if it was a different category. Like I kind of get not having a checking account for certain reasons, but they should make a brokerage account easier.
Yeah, I don't know what the logic behind not allowing it is. Right? Like I don't like what's the other side of that argument? It's like why do we not want foreigners investing in our companies? Like retail foreigners. Like I get why you wouldn't want like, you know, a sovereign wealth fund owning 100% of your strategic resource companies. Like fine, but like what's the logic behind not having, 1,000 foreigners each invest $1,000 in this stock? I don't know. But yeah,
Hmm.
it's a bureaucratic region of the world for sure. Like so sometimes the bureaucracy just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I've been really enjoying following Calvin on Twitter, the
Yeah.
Marhelm guy, and he's been actually pumping some Brazilian stocks, Petrobras specifically, and reading his analysis has been cool. I probably should have pulled the trigger on that because I feel like he's a really, really smart guy. I have not done so yet, but have you noticed his stuff?
Yeah, I like his account. He's a great account. He's an oil bull for sure. So I am notoriously bad at timing commodity sectors. Like so I try to avoid them like with my money personally. Like I'll cover them because they're interesting. Like I have a personal like interest in them. Like I love reading about the farming companies and the mining companies and stuff. But like if I buy a sugar stock was the last I covered, it's like probably the best signal that sugar is about to go down 20%. Right. Like I just don't do well timing the commodity sectors. It's not my strength. So I avoid it, but it was a great call on oil. And like Petrobras looks cheap. I mean, it's hard to explain to foreigners too how culturally important Petrobras is. Like it's a huge political issue in Brazil. Like every election. Petrobras is relevant, and it has been since the 50s, I think,
Hmm.
when it was founded. So yeah, it's there. I mean, there's I guess the only other counter argument too is like it's so big and it's like basically a government entity that there's a famous short seller, Jim Chanus, that covered Petrobras 5 years ago, and he said Petrobras isn't a company; it's a scheme. Just also true. Like there's a lot of stuff going on that has nothing to do with creating shareholder value at Petrobras, but I think the point is if oil goes up, another 20-25%, Petrobras is going to do just fine. So yeah, I don't know. I don't own it, but it's an interesting company. You can't follow Brazil and not have a somewhat of an idea of what's going on at Petrobras.
Hmm. What else are you most bullish on now in terms of there? I've actually seen a lot of discussion, even just in this past week, how some people are like extremely bullish on Brazil because it's an exporting nation, commodity exporting nation, and they're just like more bullish than ever. But yeah, I'm curious, kind of what your market thesis is at this point in time.
So like, I'm most bullish on Brazilian small caps at the moment. Like they're relative to the Brazilian index, they're at their lowest level since 2010, and they just look so cheap. I mean, they look bottomed out, and there's great companies trading at 3-4 times earnings. So there's that, and then you're right about the commodities, the importance of commodities in Brazil, right? Like, let's see, I'll pull it up. I posted right before we got on here a chart that I like because most international investors don't realize how important Brazil is to the global commodity sector. So Brazil is number one in the world in the production and export of soybeans, number three in the production of corn, number one in the export of corn, number two in sugarcane for export and production, biggest export and producer of coffee, sugar in the world, orange juice, the second largest beef producer and the largest beef export in the world. So Brazil's 25% of the world's beef exports and 34% of the world's chicken exports. So it's grown like crazy over the past 10 to 20 years, and they're probably the most important food producer in the world, I think.
Really,
Yeah.
that's a big claim.
I mean, you could argue the US, but I mean, other than that, I don't know. I mean, yeah, rice, they're 9 and 7. Pork, they're the fourth largest producer in the world, but they're the largest exporter of pork. So yeah, like arguably, like I won't claim and say, oh, they're
Right,
the
they're up
most
there.
important, but
They're up there.
top three, and they're by far the most important food producer in South America.
I mean, makes sense. Brazil is insanely huge. What about just like the management of these companies, though? Because, we're always kind of making jokes about like the comical mismanagement and somehow maybe they'll kill the golden goose or I don't know.
Yeah, that's a misconception, I think. I mean, the good companies in Brazil have world class management. I mean, like the co-founder of Facebook was from Brazil. Brazil has all these great entrepreneurs. They have great management. They all went to the top schools and stuff, right? It is like the ninth or 10th biggest economy in the world, right? Like, so there's a lot of extremely competent people. They just work under a more difficult business environment than most places, right? Like a really high tax regime, very bureaucratic. But if you can make it as an entrepreneur in Brazil, you can make it anywhere. So I think most people would be surprised at how high quality some of the professionals operating in Brazil are. And like Brazil's the kind of place too, like a lot of Brazilians leave and then come back. Like it's a great place
Right.
to live. I think there's a post about why do football players after they retire not stay in Spain, they always come back to Brazil. Yeah. Right. So there's a lot of very, very competent business people that would rather just live in Brazil close to their family, and they're world class operators.
I like that tweet too from Lawrence,
Which one? The one about the
the
football
soccer
player?
players.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
it's
yeah.
true, and but that's also true among executives. So one of the companies I cover is International Meal Company, and they're like the master franchisee in Brazil for Pizza Hut and KFC for Yum Brands, and the
Mhm.
CEO was the global CEO for Popeyes before that, and he came back to Brazil, and now he runs the KFC in Brazil. Right, like that's the only guy. It's probably the best guy in the world you would want running that business in Brazil, a Brazilian guy that used to run Popeyes internationally. So there's
Mm.
world class operators if you can find them. I mean, there's also, there's plenty of bad managers, but you'll find them anywhere. There's plenty of bad managers in the U.S. too. You know.
Fair enough. So up to par, up to par.
Yeah,
uh,
I think I wouldn't. I would criticize the incentive structures from the bureaucracy and like the tax scheme and the business conditions they operate under way more than I would criticize the professionals. I just think they have a harder playing field.
I feel like I'm asking bad questions. Uh,
No,
um,
no, dude,
what,
I'm enjoying the conversation. So.
yeah, or just like too easy questions, but not easy in like a grill you way, but just like basic stuff. Like, what are some of your big theses right now, um, in terms of maybe the future of like where you see opportunity, or what gets you excited right now in general in your
I mean,
work?
so I don't cover it. I cover LATAM stocks and I try and stay focused. But I mean, I worked for 5 years in the Brazilian cryptocurrency industry. So like, what gets me excited is that they're probably going to have to. The U.S. is going to keep adding billions and billions of dollars of debt. I think they had a $275 billion in debt in a day. So I think the money printer is about to go burr. So what I'm most bullish about globally is Bitcoin. But but other than that, I mean, if you wanted to play that from a LATAM perspective, Mexico's the biggest silver miner in the world.
Mm.
Peru, Brazil are big gold miners. Colombia too. Mexico's got a lot of gold too. So if you think the thesis is monetary debasement and you want hard assets, you can look at gold miners, and Latin America's full of them. So I try and cover some of those stocks too. I covered a silver miner in Mexico recently, and I've covered some of the gold deposits. I covered the largest gold deposit in Ecuador a few years ago.
That sounds pretty cool.
Yeah, I I learned my lesson on there. It's like don't buy cow pastures with the promise of gold in them. Right? Like they're not businesses. But some people make the investment case that gold in the ground is better than a mine. But I don't know.
Interesting. And what's kind of is there any differences that you're noting between mining companies and these resource companies based in Latin America versus based in the U.S.? Like, do they are they reporting differently on their 10Ks? Are they, um, are they managing their holdings differently? Like how would you make a comparison if you had to?
So like the first thing I would say is that it's so hard to build a mine these days. I think the average time from discovery, like globally average, this would include like Canada, the US, the average time from discovery to first pour is like 15 years, which is insane because they have to go through all these crazy permitting and you basically can't build a mine. Most of the Latin American mining stocks are listed on the Toronto Venture Exchange, the TSXV, or the
Hmm.
TSV if it's a bigger company. So that's most of the reporting is actually Canadian standard. It's not SEC. So they all report under the Canadian rules, but where it diverges is the business climate in the country. So the regulation in Mexico versus in Brazil versus in Chile. So, I think a lot of it's political too. Mining is a political issue. So like this regime in Mexico is very anti-mining. So I think they've banned new permits. They've made it much more difficult for miners there. So it's part of the risk when you invest in the mining companies. But it's diverges. They don't go after the stock. They go after the actual mine because they can't move it. So I don't know if that is a good
Yeah,
answer, but
maybe Canada and Canada's relationship with Latin America is interesting from that perspective because, as you said, a lot of the Latin American gold mining and different and resource concerns are registered in Canada. And then also, I noticed that a lot of the joint ventures and just a lot of the mining companies in general in Latin America are owned by Canadian companies. Like the Canadian miners will own the mine in Chile, for example, things like that. So I feel like there's maybe a special relationship there that's almost skipping the US because Canada has, a lot of skilled operators in natural resources. And then I guess because the TSXV is probably, I guess, a better place to register.
for sure. It's all the only other major mining, like the U.S. doesn't have many mining stocks. They all register in Canada too. So the only other major one is Australia that I think is worth noting. But like all the South American companies, obviously list in Canada. They don't list in Australia for time zone differences and just why would you list in Australia when you can list in Canada? So yeah, it's definitely, I think, multinational company perspective. It's probably the most common type of Canadian company you'll see in South America. I can't think of another one.
Hmm. And for that reason, would there be potentially like more Canadians in, say, Brazil or Chile and so forth than Americans because they're involved with these businesses?
I don't know. The funny thing about the mines is they're in the middle of nowhere usually. So like if they're there, I wouldn't see them, and you probably wouldn't traveling either. So yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't know how they staff it. Like I'm thinking of one Brazilian mining company I used to follow that was like 300 employees, but 298 of them were Brazilian, and then only the two executives were Canadians that founded it. So I don't know. I think there's a lot of geological talent in Brazil too. At least I'm not sure about in Colombia or Chile and Peru for sure too, right? Because Chile is the largest copper producer in the world. So I think there is a lot of local talent, right? I think they probably graduate. I don't have the stats, but they probably graduate more geologists in South America than we do in the U.S. If I were to have to guess, I would put my money on
Hmm.
Brazil graduating more geologists than the U.S.
Hey, everybody. Hey, everybody. Quick break from the podcast to tell you about Language Blend, the best new way to learn Spanish. Language Blend was co founded by Jake Nomada, friend of the podcast, decade of experience in Latin America. And Jake and his team, they put everything into this program that they wish they had in terms of how to level up quickly with your Spanish language skills. Because the faster that you can get conversationally fluent in Spanish, the better the experience that you're going to have in Latin America. So go to languageblend.com for more information. Switching gears slightly, like what is the value proposition of Latin American companies? Like I imagine they sort of trade at a slight discount to American companies for a variety of reasons. Like how do you make the case to um, to allocators and investors that they should be investing in Latin American companies instead of, say, in the American market or other international markets?
So I guess I would say there's two arguments, right? Like if you're looking at someone that just invests in index funds, the question is why should I take 5% of my net worth and put it in the Brazilian and Mexican index funds instead of just leaving the S&P? And I think you just it's diversity benefit, right? Like why would you want to own all your assets in one country? Why would you want them all in one currency? Like diversifying is pretty close to a free lunch in investing. So South America is a huge economy if you look at it together. It's globally relevant. We talked about like the Brazilian food stats, oil production is relevant, mining it's relevant. So it's a globally relevant region with globally relevant economies, and you know there's a reason to put 2 or 3% of your net worth in an index fund that can benefit from diversifying there. And then as for like the value proposition of specific companies, I think you really got to dig in and have an opinion on the specific commodity if you're looking at the commodities producers or the specific company in the country, right? So there's a lot of bad companies listed in Brazil. Like when I go down my spreadsheet of Brazilian companies, I have a lot of them in red that I would never invest in. So you just have to do the work, and I'm a stock picker at the end of the day. So the value proposition is individual to the company for me. But I do think that the higher level for institutional allocators or individuals that just buy index funds and don't pick stocks, then there's a reason to have a certain percentage of your portfolio in South
And
American
then other
economies.
other than the diversification benefits, like what else is there? Like, are they undervalued? Are you seeing maybe lower valuations compared to the U.S. or something? Like, what, other than diversification, like what else is really like propelling, and making it a good pick?
Yeah, the last time I looked, there most of the Latin American stock markets that are relevant, Chile, Brazil, Mexico, are cheaper than the U.S. markets on a price to earnings basis. So you can make the argument they're cheaper. If you have a view on agricultural commodities or gold or oil, than a country with a small stock market like Colombia and have a big oil company is probably going to do pretty well if oil goes up. So if you're bullish on a certain commodity, then you can gain exposure via South America via the equities.
Okay, cool. I like it. I like it. Dude, just wanted to ask you how the Substack and Twitter and stuff is going overall. You've been having fun. I noticed the Substack's been around for like 3 years now, so that came before the Twitter.
Yeah, so I started the Substack, and then like 3 months after I started it, like this is what I've always wanted to do. I like covering Brazilian companies. Like I like equities. Like the I went and worked for the crypto companies because hey, the opportunity came around. So right after I started, I got headhunted by like two of the bigger Brazilian crypto companies in the same week. And they just sent me offers. It's like, okay. Yeah, and 100% remote. Like, I didn't have to change anything. So I figured I had to take one because, two in the same week, take one, right? Don't be an idiot. So I took it. And then, I talked about culturally, Brazilian companies are like highly social. And like, it's kind of, how could I describe it? It's the blade of grass that sticks its head up is the one that gets cut off, right? Like gets its head cut off. So it's like you don't want to you don't want to draw too much attention to yourself in a Brazilian company. So I let the Substack kind of just fade away and focused on my work for my client at the time. And then yeah, as soon as I decided to leave there at the beginning of this year, in February, I said I'm gonna just do it. I'm gonna add the Twitter on and keep publishing on Substack. And it's gone well. So it's growing as I hoped it would. So between LinkedIn and Substack, I've taken it from like 100 people when I started at the beginning of the year to over 2,500. And then Twitter, I was at like 200 people, and I'm at 1,600, 1,700, something like that. So yeah, it's fine. Like I feel like if I stick with it, I'll do fine.
Yeah, you passed the hard part. The hard part's getting to 1,000.
It is right. It's weird. People just don't like you until you have 1,001.
Yeah, social proof. I don't know.
Yeah, and then I feel like you don't really start to get the network effect until you start to get to like the 7 or 8,000, where like every post you're putting out's getting enough engagements to matter.
Honestly, I think even like 3,000, 4,000. Like I have guys that I see that they only have 3, 4, 6,000 followers, and we're almost getting like the same level of engagement. And I have like high engagement for I feel so. I think the algorithm is a little bit weird. You know what I mean? Like Lawrence King is like 100K plus 150K, but he in some cases, not to throw shade on him, we've talked about this actually, me and him, but like accounts with like 3, 4,000 followers will get like the same engagement. Like basically, I feel like once you hit a certain point, everyone just gets like 7 retweets and 90 likes. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah,
kind of
well,
weird.
they changed the algorithm in like August, didn't they? When they started paying
I mean,
people,
I think they're constantly changing it.
supposedly, because like I had a big drop off. I noticed like I was punching above my weight. I was doing hundreds of thousands of impressions in a month on like two posts a day. And
Mhm.
then yeah, in August it kind of just like died. And I thought maybe I was posting. I started using Linktree instead of posting Substack. So I thought maybe they were just penalizing my account for posting too many links. So I stopped doing that, and it started to come back.
Yeah, I mean, just stick with it. I think like X is the future, so just
And how's
just
the
something.
how's the video content gone since you started posting these on?
Yeah, I started posting the podcasts on X. It's audio only, so like it's I guess obviously not as engaging as like a pure video play, but um, it's better. I when like the first 80 something episodes only went on the podcast platforms and on YouTube. So at least now I'm able to post it where I have 20,000 plus followers. So
True,
that's certainly an improvement.
true. And then you do one every week, like
2 week
you do 2 a week.
basically.
Nice.
Yeah.
How's that been trying to like schedule people? Because we talked about at the very beginning that it's just surprising how few people actually cover LATAM. Like, how's it been trying to?
Yeah, I mean, every time I think I'm running out of guests, more guests come out of the woodwork. So it's
Okay,
been all
okay,
right.
cool.
um, what else? And dude, so you're getting married soon?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, engaged. So like we're engaged now, and then I don't know what we're gonna do. I don't.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I don't know what we're gonna do for a wedding though, because like her family's all in Brazil. Yeah, so I don't even want to think about that yet. The logistics are a nightmare, and so yeah, we're gonna go in for Christmas, and then let's see what we do. But yeah, nothing, no date set or anything, because I don't know. Like it's the Brazilian tourist visa has never recovered for Brazilians to get U.S. visas. It can be like 2 years at certain consulates in Brazil, and like
Right.
not her whole family has it. So
But does she have it?
yeah, yeah, she's had it, but yeah,
Oh, thank God.
yeah, yeah, she's fine. And then it's easier to renew too. So I understand that it's faster if you're renewing versus the first
Mhm.
time. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know.
Well, at least she has that. That's great.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
And we forgot to mention you're in Bulgaria right now.
yeah. I'm in Sofia. So yeah, so I guess I'll tell that story. So like when we like end of 2021, everything was still locked down, right? Like there was still a bunch of weird rules. But I hadn't been home in almost like 2 years, so I wanted to go see my family, and we just decided that like my visa still wasn't ready because I was in the process of renewing my visa at the end of 2019, and then Brazil just shut down the visa office for like 2 years. It only came back like early this year, so they just weren't processing visas for 2 years. So I was just in limbo. So we just decided at the end of 2021 we're going to travel, and there were two countries that we could get out of Brazil into and then also get back into on two separate passports, right? Like so, like it was different for every passport, right? Brazilians could go to these places, but this place wasn't taking Americans. So we could go to Mexico or Serbia. So we booked a ticket to Belgrade and then went to Belgrade and Montenegro, and just we liked the Balkans a lot. So we decided to come back. We've ended up spending almost 3 months in Croatia, a couple weeks in Bosnia, almost 2 months in Greece, and now a month here in Sofia, and we've liked everywhere we've been.
And this is while working for a Brazilian company.
Yeah, yeah. Like I said, the company when they made me the offer, the reason I took it is 100% remote. So yeah, they were a little surprised when I showed up in Serbia and the VPN or whatever they have the antivirus. They're like, you were literally the first person to ever try this. You guys told me the policy was work from anywhere. So here you go, fix it. But yeah, so and the time zone's okay. I actually don't mind it. I get a lot more done because I can get all my stuff done in the morning. But once you're in Turkey at like 7 hours difference, it's a little much. You know, once you're having
Yeah,
to
like
work
the
at
Portugal difference. Like
yeah, 4 hours is
actually,
great.
Portugal Brazil is like tiny. Yeah, it's like four
4 or 5 hours
hours
is
or
great.
something.
Six is fine. It's doable. Like because if you're the other thing about like Brazilian work culture, right? Like it's a hard stop at 6 o'clock. Like hard stop. Like you don't have to take a meeting at 6:15. So yeah, so you work till midnight. So like, if you sleep in a little later and you adjust your sleep schedule, it's fine. But once you're up to 1 or 2 in the morning, it's too much.
Yeah, I feel you. I feel you.
Have you
That's
been to this?
awesome.
Have you been to the Balkans, like this part of the world? I think I saw you post about Eastern Europe. Maybe it wasn't you, but
I'm not really Eastern Europe guy. I'll do Italy, and I go to Europe every year, but I do like Italy, Spain, Portugal, a little Ireland, stuff like that. I haven't really been an Eastern Europe guy.
okay. Yeah, I was surprised how much I liked it. I had no expectations whatsoever. Like I didn't think I was going to travel to Serbia ever, and then we were there, and like Belgrade, I thought was really cool. Montenegro was awesome as like a tourist spot, but yeah, I like Italy
Hmm.
too. I worked on a vineyard in Italy for 3 months when I was younger. So we're going. Actually, that's where we're going. We're flying out and going to Italy next week.
That's awesome. What part?
Emilia Romana. So we're gonna stay
Uh,
in Reg.
Tuscany type
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah, right. Yeah, so we'll finish in Tuscany. So the airfare we land in Bologna, and then we'll fly back home from Florence.
That's awesome. That's awesome. That is in. Are you getting paid like 100% in reais?
If my client's Brazilian, yeah. Right now I'm just doing the Substack stuff. Right now I'm not working. I'm 100% on my own.
Ah,
So, but I always
okay.
keep the company open. So like I told you, my LinkedIn, I get passive inbound on my LinkedIn, and like if I want to take
Sweet.
a Brazilian client, I can take it. But yeah, no, right now I'm 100% doing the Substack,
And
and
so you maintain US bank accounts so that you can get paid there sometimes, but then I assume now you also have Brazilian bank accounts, so you're kind of getting like a mix of both
yeah,
depending on.
100%. The client can pay me in the U.S., you can pay me in Brazil, you can pay me in Bitcoin. I don't care.
Cool. Cool. I know we're kind of bouncing around to the end, but
It's all good,
yeah,
man.
just we're just chopping it up a little bit. How are things going in terms of working towards citizenship in Brazil?
So I just, like I told you, it was all backed up. So I'm a permanent resident. So like I can get citizenship if I want. I think after in like a few more months, if I want it. I honestly was so exhausted by the delayed process with all the COVID crap that like I'm just the furthest thing from my mind is starting another visa or citizenship process.
You got to do it. You got to
Yeah.
do it.
Yeah, I mean, I'll have the right to do it. Like, and I'll have the right to do it at any point. And the Portuguese test and everything, I think I don't need to worry about. So, yeah, we'll see. We'll see. I just, dude, I can't imagine having to talk to my lawyer again about a visa or citizenship. It was almost 4 years, man. It took almost 4 years from start to finish to renew everything. So,
Yeah, but you need a second passport.
yeah, yeah. Well, I got a home. I got a second home for sure. So I got a first home. Brazil is home. So,
Brazil is home.
yeah.
What's like your ideal Brazil setup? Like apartment slash house in Sao Paulo, and then maybe like a second home in Floripa, or
I don't know, man. Sao Paulo's become love hate for me. Like it was great earlier in my career when I needed to be, working in person and whatever. But it's just such a big city, and it's exhausting after a while. So we're always going to end up spending a month or two there a year. Like my jujitsu's there, her family's there. She likes the gym. All her friends are there. Not all of her friends actually. A lot of her friends moved out, like a lot of London and stuff. But so we'll always have a foot in Sao Paulo. But after a few months, I'm so ready to go at this point when I go there. So I've got a couple good Airbnbs. I don't know if I'd buy a place in Sao Paulo. The real estate's overpriced relative to Brazil, I think. So no, I think I'd rather be in Floripa long term if I were to pick a place to settle down. Would be Floripa and then a few months in Sao Paulo, and then the rest of the year, either visiting my family in the U.S. or traveling.
nice. I like it. Are you, by the way, are you in our Brazil enthusiast Telegram group, free group?
No, I've seen it, man. But honestly, I have Telegram on my phone, but I think I've opened it once in the past 4 months. So I don't know. I use I
Telegram's coming up, bro. It's
I
coming up.
like I use WhatsApp because another thing about Brazilian culture is WhatsApp is obligatory. And I mean obligatory. It's like where everyone works. Like
Yeah.
it's more common than Slack. When Facebook bought WhatsApp back in the day, WhatsApp had about 200 million users at the time and 100 million of them were Brazilian.
Really?
Yeah. So it was a Brazilian company before Facebook bought it pretty much.
Yeah,
But
same with TikTok.
so yeah,
TikTok, I guess.
I keep the WhatsApp web open and stuff, but yeah, I don't know. Everyone I talk to is on WhatsApp. I've converted all the people, my parents and everybody I'm going to talk to are on WhatsApp. So I don't know. I don't open the other message app, but send it to me. I'll enter and see what's
Okay.
in there for
This
sure.
was also a sly promotion
It's all right.
for anyone listening. Join our free Telegram groups. There's a main group with 2,500 people. There's a Brazil enthusiast group. We have a bunch of country specific groups. There's a Mexico group, a Colombia group, etc. And so there's a Brazil group. So if you have a special interest in Brazil, you want to meet up with other gringos based in Brazil and ask questions, you can join the Brazil group, and I'll definitely be linking that in the show notes to this episode. So that'll be my little promo for the episode. And now, Patrick, let's make it your turn to shout out your Substack, your Twitter, and anywhere that you want to send the audience's attention.
Cool. Yeah, definitely send me the Telegram group. I'll check it out. It looks cool. But
Thank
the
you.
Brazil enthusiast group, I was like, I should be in there and see if I can't help somebody out, right? But yeah, LATAM stocks on Twitter, LATAM stocks. You can find me on LinkedIn if you happen to use LinkedIn. Patrick Flood, FLOOD, and then it's latamstocks.substack.com if you're interested in Brazilian companies. I write them up about one a month.
Love it. Mr. LatAm Stocks. I think you secured a hell of a handle, hell of a username, by the way.
Right?
Is there a website? Do you have the domain?
No, I should have bought it. But no, I didn't buy it. I think it was like 20 grand the last time I looked at it. So like,
Yeah. Maybe you should sell that guy
right.
the
I'm
X handle.
squatting. I got some useless friggin' domains, and then I'm not squatting on the right ones. But no, I've been using Substack. I don't know. I don't know how I feel about Substack anymore. I was talking to someone about it. A lot of people are moving to Beehive, so I don't know what to do.
Yeah, it's like a newsletter thing. Owning your email list. Cool. Anyway, yeah, Patrick, thank you so much for doing this, Mr. LATAM Stocks. This has been another episode of My Latin Life podcast. Again, my guest today, Patrick Flood. All his info, his Twitter account will be linked in the show notes. Thanks again, Patrick, for doing this.
I appreciate it, man. It was a lot of fun. We should do it again.